Here's the uncomfortable truth about retirement planning. A huge number of retirees are scared of running out of money, and a huge number of them die with way too much of it. Not a little too much. I'm talking about people who followed the standard retirement playbook, spent carefully for years, and still ended up with portfolios that doubled, tripled, sometimes even more. Which sounds like a success, until you ask the obvious question: what exactly were they protecting it for? Because if you spend 20 years being told to be careful, to stay disciplined, to withdraw conservatively, to respect the 4% rule, and then you reach your late 70s or 80s with far more money than you started with, that is not automatically a win. It may mean the system trained you to live smaller than your life required. And that is what this video is really about. Why the most famous rule in retirement planning was never meant to be used the way most people use it. Why financial advice keeps pushing retirees toward underspending, and why some of the most intelligent, cautious, responsible people end up sacrificing their healthiest retirement years to protect a number that was never in real danger. Let me give you the central metaphor for this whole video. Retirement planning is like packing for a hiking trip when you don't know whether the trail is 3 days long or 3 weeks long. The 4% rule is the guy who shows up with 6 tents, 47 meals, extra boots, 3 water filters, 2 emergency radios, and enough backup gear to survive a small civilizational collapse. Will he survive? Probably. Will he be safe? Absolutely. Will he enjoy the hike? That's a different question. Because by mile 5, he's exhausted. By the time he reaches the most beautiful part of the trail, he's too burdened by his own preparation to fully take it in. And that, in one image, is what conventional retirement planning does to a lot of people. It overpacks them for disasters that may never happen. Then, it congratulates them for arriving with unused supplies. Now, to understand why this happened, we need to go back to where the 4% rule came from, because the origin story matters. In the 1990s, financial planner William Bengen asked a specific question. What annual withdrawal rate would have survived the worst 30-year retirement periods in modern American market history? That means the ugliest cases. The retiree who got hit by the Great Depression. The retiree who got nailed by stagflation. The retiree who started at the worst possible time and had the worst possible sequence of returns. And the answer he found was about 4%. That number became legendary. But here's the part most people never hear. The 4% rule was designed as a survival floor. It was built to answer the question, what survives the worst historical cases? That is a very different question from, what should a normal retiree comfortably spend? Those are not the same thing. One is bunker engineering, the other is life design. And somewhere along the way, the financial industry took a number designed for historically brutal retirement conditions and turned it into a universal lifestyle commandment. Everyone gets the bunker. The catastrophically unlucky retiree gets the bunker. The statistically average retiree gets the bunker. The retiree with Social Security and a pension gets the bunker. The retiree with modest spending needs gets the bunker. Same answer, same caution, same overpacked bag. That would already be a problem, but it gets worse. Because the man who created the rule later revised his own work upward. Meaning even the original architect acknowledged that the famous number people still quote like scripture was too conservative for practical use. Think about that. An entire industry built decades of retirement guidance around a number that even its own creator later softened. And still, millions of people are living as if every retirement starts in 1929. Now let's talk about why this matters in the real world. Imagine a retiree with a diversified portfolio earning something close to long-term average returns. Nothing magical, nothing reckless. If the portfolio grows around 7% and the retiree withdraws 4%, what's happening in the average year? They're still growing. Not every year, obviously. Markets are messy. But over long stretches, the math can turn retirement into something strange. People withdraw money for years while the pile quietly gets bigger anyway. That sounds impossible to someone raised on retirement fear. But it isn't. It is exactly what happens when a conservative withdrawal rate collides with compounding. And that creates a bizarre outcome. The retirement system tells people they are drawing down assets. In many cases, they are barely touching the machine. That's how you get retirees deep into retirement with balances that still look intact or larger, while they've spent years saying no to travel, no to gifts, No to experiences. No to the one season of life the money was supposed to unlock. Now, whenever people hear this, they say the same thing. What about sequence of returns risk? Fair question. This is the real danger in retirement. If you retire and the market crashes early, withdrawals hurt more because you're selling assets when prices are down. That can permanently damage a portfolio. This is not fake risk. It is real risk. But here's the trick. A real risk with a manageable solution got inflated into a permanent mindset of fear. Because the practical answer to sequence risk is not spend like a scared person for 30 years. The practical answer is much more specific. Keep a meaningful cash buffer. Give yourself flexibility in bad markets. Reduce forced selling when prices are ugly. Adjust tactically when needed. That solves a lot. You do not need to spend your healthiest decade pretending every year is an emergency. The overpacked hiker does not need 6 tents because there might be one thunderstorm. He needs 1 tent and a plan. Now here's where the story turns from math into incentives. Because once you see the structure, you cannot unsee it. Most advisors who manage retirement portfolios are paid as a percentage of assets under management. That means the larger your balance stays, the more they earn. Again, this does not require corruption. It doesn't even require bad intent. It just creates gravity. If your retirement plan spins down your portfolio aggressively, the fee base falls. If your retirement plan keeps your balance high, the fee base stays healthier for longer. So, which direction do you think advice naturally leans? Toward preservation, toward caution, toward a larger, untouched pile. Not because someone has to sit in a dark room and scheme about it, because incentives shape behavior even when nobody says the quiet part out loud. And retirees absorb that caution as wisdom. They hear discipline. They hear prudence. They hear protecting your future. What they often do not hear is this. The money exists to serve your life. Your life does not exist to preserve the account balance. That sentence alone would change how many people retire. But even incentives are not the whole story. Because retirees are not passive victims here. There is a psychological trap too, and it is powerful. Once people see a number on a screen, $400,000, $600,000, $900,000, the balance starts to feel sacred. It feels real. It feels safe. Spending from it feels like injury. Even when the spending is rational. Even when the math supports it. Even when the experience being purchased would create more actual value than staring at the number ever could. This is why intelligent people underspend. Not because they are stupid, because their brain treats the portfolio balance like something to defend. The hypothetical trip, the apartment abroad, the renovations, the time with family, those feel optional, abstract, even indulgent. The balance feels like survival. And that instinct is ancient. Hoard resources. Do not deplete the store. Protect the pile. That instinct made sense when scarcity meant winter starvation. It makes much less sense when you have Social Security, Medicare, diversified assets, and a retirement framework built for conditions far worse than the one you're actually living in. Let me show you what this looks like as a human story. Imagine a woman. Call her Carol. Carol retires in her mid-60s with a modest portfolio, a small pension, and future Social Security. She is careful, responsible, exactly the kind of person financial planning culture admires. And she has a dream. She wants to spend a year in Lisbon. She has priced it out. She can afford it. It would not blow up her plan. But she gets told to wait. Let the portfolio stabilize. Watch early retirement risk. See how markets behave. Maybe later. So she delays, and the years pass. The account grows. The plan looks successful. But the version of the dream that matched her health, energy, and budget slowly disappears. Prices go up. Her body changes. Mobility gets harder. And one day the portfolio is stronger, but the window is weaker. That is retirement tragedy in one frame. The spreadsheet improved. The moment expired. And this is the part people miss. The biggest risk in retirement is not always running out of money. Sometimes it's running out of life while still behaving as if the emergency has not passed. Now let's add another layer most planning models flatten completely. Real retirement spending is not a straight line. Human life does not work that way. Most retirees spend more in the early active years. That's when they travel, move, explore, see people, do the things they imagined for decades. Then, spending often slows in the middle years. Then later, healthcare and care-related costs can rise again. That shape matters. Because the classic retirement model often acts like a human being should consume the same inflation-adjusted amount every year for 3 decades, like some kind of spending robot. But real people have stages. Your energy at 67 is different from your energy at 82. Your appetite for life is different. Your body is different. Your options are different. So a retirement plan that protects you beautifully at 88 but starves your level 2 life at 68 may be technically conservative and emotionally disastrous. That's why I think about retirement spending in 3 levels. Level 1 is your survival floor: housing, food, healthcare, insurance, the real non-negotiables. For many retirees, Social Security and any pension already cover a lot of this. That matters more than most people realize. Level 2 is quality of life spending: travel, experiences, hobbies, generosity, the actual texture of retirement. This is the part many people underfund emotionally, even when they can fund it financially. Level 3 is legacy and emergency reserve: long-term care, true catastrophe, estate goals, the money you deliberately hold back. The problem with old-school retirement thinking is that it treats almost the whole portfolio like Level 3. All of it becomes emergency money. All of it becomes sacred. All of it stays packed in the bag. And that creates a life where the retiree may be objectively secure while subjectively living under self-imposed austerity. That's the hidden cost. Now let's make this more concrete. Suppose a retired couple has Social Security covering a large chunk of baseline living costs. Suppose they also have a moderate portfolio. Under a conservative framework, they may withdraw 4%, protect the balance, and end up decades later with a surprisingly intact or even larger portfolio. Under a slightly more generous framework, they may spend meaningfully more every year, still retain substantial assets in many scenarios, and still have guaranteed income underneath everything. That doesn't mean everyone should blindly spend more. It means the distribution of outcomes is wider and more forgiving than people are usually told. And that leads to the real question: what exactly are you optimizing for? Because if your goal is never feel uncertainty, never adjust, never face risk, and die with a pristine account balance, then yes, the most conservative rule wins. But if your goal is support a real life, protect the floor, and use wealth during the years when it can still turn into memory, movement, and freedom, then the answer changes a lot. So what should you actually do with this? 3 practical takeaways. First, separate survival from lifestyle. Sit down and calculate what your true, non-negotiable floor actually is. Not the vague, scary number in your head, the real number. Then compare that against Social Security, pension income, and other guaranteed sources. A lot of retirees are safer at the floor level than they think. That changes how you should view the portfolio. Second, stop using one flat rule as if it solves a 3-decade human life. Model retirement in phases. Your 60s and early 70s are not the same as your 80s. Front-load some of the quality of life spending into the years when your energy is highest and your body can still cash the check. Third, decide in advance what the money is for. Write it down. Make it concrete. Because if you wait until the spending moment arrives, your brain will almost always protect the balance instead. You need a pre-made decision stronger than the fear you'll feel when the time comes. That is how you beat underspending. Not by becoming reckless, by becoming intentional. And that's the twist in all of this. The 4% rule was supposed to protect retirees. In practice, for many people, it became a psychological permission structure for postponing life. It turned caution into identity. It turned prudence into overprotection. It trained people to think the untouched pile was proof of success. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is proof that the plan worked for the portfolio and failed the person. If you retire with dignity, freedom, solid guaranteed income, a diversified portfolio, and still spend your healthiest years acting like a financial famine is around the corner, you may not be safe. You may be overpacked. And the real tragedy is that by the time many people realize that, the years they were saving the experience for are already gone. That's the retirement conversation almost nobody wants to have. Not, will I run out of money? But this: will I run out of time while still protecting money I was always supposed to use?